everyone, and welcome to Lavinia World. My name is Monica of Heartcraftpaper, and I'm so glad you could join us today. For today's project, I'm going to show you how to make a rustic Christmas wreath card. All right, we're ready to get started and working on our craft. I do want to go over some of the items that you're going to be needing for today's craft. First off, let's go ahead and start off with our Lavinia stamps. I have the first one here, which is the reindeer, and I absolutely love that little creature. I have the mistletoe. I also have the snowflakes, and these do come with several sets, so that's a total of a cluster of 3 and 2. I have the mini dots, and then I have the sentiment, which is have a very Merry Christmas. Oops. Sorry about that. Again, that's the have a very Merry Christmas. Next, I'm going to be using my watercolors. You can use any watercolors you might have on hand, but these just happen to be my absolute favorite. Next, we're going to need the Canson's XL mixed media paper. Now, the reason I picked this paper is because of how thin it is and the color and shading of it. I didn't want it to be too yellow. I wanted more of a white paper, but this is perfect for any type of media that you might have. So let's go ahead and get everything else out of the way. I chose to use a Heroes Art Mid-Tone Cup of Joe. You can use any type of brown that you want for blending. I chose this one just because of the coloring itself. Next, I have my Versaclear Fine Inks, and this is Warm Breeze. I love the color on this. I now have Pine Cone. And this last one is called Shady Lane. For the next process, you would need to have some type of masking. Now, you can use a masking circle, but because this is watercolor, I have this biscuit. I love this for blocking off sections, especially when I'm using watercolors. You'll also need some gold ribbon, then 1/8 inch double-sided tape, or thicker if you'd like, that's up to you, some glue, a red Sharpie marker, and some clear embossing powder. We're now ready to go ahead and get started. So here I am starting with a 5.5 by 5.5 trim out of that Canson's watercolor paper or mixed media paper. I have a circular die. This is from Memory Box, but I'm not going to actually use it for die cutting. I'm going to use it to be able to trace and line out exactly where I want to mask off. So I'm going to use a pencil in order to line out this circle. And then I'm going to go ahead and come right back in with an eraser and lightly go over my pencil marking. I don't want it to really show through, so it's going to be very light. All right, it's time to bring in the biscuit. Again, you can use a circle masking, but because I'm using watercolor, I like using my biscuit. Just make sure that you shake it up well. Utilize a brush for painting this on, and I'm just gonna go ahead and line that circle. Sorry about my dog there. He likes to be nosy and wants to see what I'm using, but I'm gonna go ahead and kind of fast forward this so you can see exactly what I'm doing, but I'm just lining out the circle here. Now, I'm not going to fill in the whole entire circle. It is going to be left with kind of a thick border. And once I have everything ready, I'm going to go ahead and set it aside to dry so we can go ahead and move on. We're good to go. So here I have my paper already set down with some washi tape, just so it doesn't curl up too much. I'm going to come in and lay some water down, just kind of dabbing it on wherever it may fall. And once I get this kind of going, I'm going to add some color. Now, my water does have a little bit of green in it, just because I was mixing up my colors already to kind of get the color that I wanted. So once I'm happy with how I have that water laying down, I'm just going to start dabbing in that color and let the water just really take the color and move with it. Since this is going to be a wreath, I decided that it's going to have a green background, but I decided on making sure that it was a nice, beautiful foresty green. Once I have everything colored in, I'm just going to go ahead and come right back with my splatter brush to be able to add a darker green to this and splatter on some sprinkles just to give it more depth to this particular card. Now, I did try to be a little bit careful of my masking so I didn't go over it too much. Once I have everything to my liking, I'm going to go ahead and use my heat tool or my heat gun in order to kind of get this to dry off. All right, let's give this a little test. We are now dry. You can see there's no color coming off. I'm going to start off with my mistletoe. I'm going to use the Shady Lane in order to color this up. I'm just going to go ahead and get this onto my stamping block. All right, we have our stamp ready to go. Again, this is Shady Lane. I like this color because it's more on the yellow side. And I'm just going to ink up my image. I love these inks because they have very good coverage and they dry fairly quickly on this particular type of paper. So we're going to go ahead and actually work around the circle. Let me just figure out how I want this to kind of go. And that, again, that Minska is going to go ahead and block off some of these leaves. So it's going to leave a rather perfect circle as we go and work through. Please note, I am re-inking after every single stamp. I want to make sure I keep that nice vivid color in the foreground. Now that my image is already dried a little bit, I'm going to come in and just wipe off that excess ink off of the Minskit. When I remove the Minskit, I don't want it to smudge anywhere. And here I have a little bit of an exposed area that didn't get enough Minskit, so it did have a little bit of a leaf, but that's okay. We're going to come back in and fix that. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of coloring where it shouldn't be. How this is going to work with the Minskit is I'm just going to simply rub this off and it will come off pretty nice and neat. Once I have this all removed, I'm going to come back in with a sand eraser. And that's just going to remove any ink that I don't want in certain places, or, you know, maybe there's still some Minskit that's still there that I didn't see. So this kind of affords me a little bit of leeway to kind of come in and fix things up a little bit. Now, this particular spot is not removing quite as well as I would like, but that's fine. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of imperfection as long as we can cover it up. Next, I'm going to be coming in with my reindeer stamp. And again, this has got a lot of detail, which is why I like using this Versaclear Fine. I'm using the pine cone color for this. I'm just going to go ahead and put this onto my stamping block so we can get this nice and done. The trick to this is going to be to cover up the image fairly evenly with the Versaclear Fine. We're going to stamp off in one stamp. Again, the Versaclear Fine does offer quite a bit of coverage, which is why I like using these inks, especially with the Lavinia Stamps, because they are solid. This gives a lot of color and a lot of detail, and just you don't get stuck with using just simply black. All right, so let's go ahead and reveal this. And with one stamp, you can see it gets quite a lot of color on there. But there's also this rustic feel because it didn't necessarily color everything. You get some of that white coming through, a little bit of a splotchy white. So that's the exact look that I'm going for on this card. Now I'm coming in with the red Sharpie marker in order to fill in these berries. Now you're probably thinking, why are you using just a regular Sharpie marker? Well, number one, it's going to give good coverage over the watercolor. Number two, I didn't want to add too much dimension. I did not want to detract from that rustic feel. Because if I used maybe glossy inks or whatnot, it might end up giving it way too much shine, more shine than I want. Again, it's more rustic. And last of all, I didn't want to give it dimension. I wanted it to be more of a flat card. And again, it goes with that rustic feel. I don't feel that a rustic card would have that much dimension going. Now, this is absolutely beautiful. I love the little splash of red color that's popping through. Next, I'm going to come in with the little mini dots, and I love this stamp set in order to give a lot of texture to my cards. Now, I'm going to be using pine cone again for this. They're little spots of color here and there. It's not going to be a lot of that color, so it's going to kind of sit somewhere towards the background. It won't really draw from the reindeer image. And for this, I am going to stamp off twice with each coloring, so that way I get a smattering of color and not necessarily quite a lot. I am going around the whole entire wreath to actually do this, just being careful that I don't overstep that boundary that I've already set and still remain inside of my washi tape that I have set there. Next, I'm going to be coming in with the snowflakes, and this is just going to add a little bit of interest just around the reindeer. I feel it's a little bit too plain in that little circle. I probably could have come in with some gold watercolor, but to be honest, I love this warm breeze, and I think this will fit perfectly. So what's going to happen is, because this is a set of 3 and they are the smaller of the snowflakes, I want to use 1. So I'm going to mask off with some washi tape just like that for this little guy here. I'm going to go ahead and ink that up, and then I'll remove the washi tape and stamp it off. So that's a neat little trick when you want to isolate a particular image on your stamp. Again, this is the warm breeze. So I'll go ahead and repeat this process a couple more times. I'll add in some snowflakes all around the reindeer, just depending on the size and what I'm going for. As you can see, I'm coming in with all 3 here. I'll probably come back in and just, with 1 or 2. So again, it's all going to depend on what I'm trying to do or what I'm trying to accomplish in my technique. Now, I did feel that the snowflakes needed a little extra support, so I came back in with the warm breeze and just kind of tapped off a couple of those mini dots. And the good thing is that the wreath around it is actually hiding quite a bit of that overlapping color, so that's pretty neat. Okay, so now I've removed my masking tape, and I'm going to stamp off with the sentiment. Now, I'm not going to create a firm image with the sentiment. I want to have it kind of as a background towards this image, just to add a little bit of support, that Merry Christmas feel. So I'm going to stamp off some of that color and come on in just to create a little bit of wording variation here and there. All right, time to add a little bit more life to this card. It's a little bit too bright and white for me. I want the rustic feel. So I'm gonna come in with my Cup of Joe and just blend in some ink all around the edges. This will give it a little bit more dimension. You can come back in if you'd like. It's a personal preference, but you can distress the edges if that's what you would like to do. Darken up certain areas, lighten certain areas, and here you go. Okay, I'm coming in with my card base, and this is a 6x6 inch card base. I'm going to use my sentiment. I'm going to stamp off utilizing the shading lane. I want to keep that coloring that I have on the front and just make sure that it kind of runs through the whole entire card. Now, typically I like leaving my insides blank, but I really do love this sentiment. And because I used it on the front, I want to make sure that it comes through right as soon as you open this card. Again, this ink that we're using does take a bit to dry typically, so it's perfect for stamping and then embossing. You can use clear embossing powder, and you don't necessarily have to buy particular colors of embossing powder in order to make your work kind of stand out. And that's the lovely thing about this. So let me go ahead and heat emboss this, and we'll be right back. Now here we have a very lovely finish to this card. It does have a little bit of texture, and it's a very beautiful color of green. All right, let's go ahead and start assembling our card. So to add a little bit more color to this card, I decided to use Kraft Cardstock in order to cover up my card base. I trimmed it down to 6 by 6. And I'm going to use some liquid glue in order to adhere this down. This is by preference. You can use definitely double-sided tape if that's what you like to use. But as far as I'm concerned, I like to have a very good and strong bond, so I use liquid glue. Once you've got that good and covered, just go ahead, flip that over, and adhere it onto your card base. Now you'll just want to make sure, and this is why I like utilizing liquid glue, is that it gives me a little bit of wiggle room in order to adhere it down to my card base. Now, my cardstock is not necessarily perfectly trimmed to 6 by 6, but you know what? That's okay. I'm just going to kind of make sure everything is along the edges at the bottom and sides. Then I'm going to come with a pair of scissors and just trim off that top just to make sure that it's nice and even. So there really never is anything that you can do wrong with card making. You just have to know how to fix up your little boo-boos and errors. I mean, it's pretty simple, and this is, you know, it didn't take off that much. All right, so here I have everything kind of ready to go, but I feel that this needs to be a little bit more distressed. Now, I'm going to come in with my scissors and run it along the edges and wear down that paper. Once I have everything the way that I want it, I'm going to come back in with my ink and just blend in some more color into that just to make it nice and even all the way around. So we're down to the last bit of details. I'm going to come in with my gold ribbon. And the way this is going to work is I'm going to lay this across just kind of as a measurement to make sure that I get enough of the ribbon that it will fold around my image. And then I'm going to go ahead and get that nice and trimmed down. Once that's done, I'm going to come back in and make a bow right onto that particular piece of ribbon cutout that I made. And the reason why I'm doing it this way is it will allow me to slide back and forth over that ribbon so I can position it exactly where I want. But this will make things a little bit easier and neater rather than tying a bow in the middle and then trying to adhere that down around the actual card piece. Because what will happen is it will unravel and unwrap on me. Here, as you can see, I have a pretty good piece of bow. I think this will work. This is perfect. Just make sure you tighten it up and you're good to go. All right, this is what your ribbon should look like once you've tied your bow onto it. Flip over your card piece, and then you're going to add some of the double-sided tape right onto the back of your ribbon. This is the section that's going to fold over your image. Now, you're probably wondering why I only did one side. Well, that's because I want to make sure I get the layout first of where I'm going to add this onto the second side. I want to make sure I get a nice straight line. So I'm going to go ahead and peel this off, fold this behind my card exactly where I want it. And now it just makes it easier for me to line up that ribbon and know exactly where I'm gonna adhere it. And as you can see, I felt that it needed to be a little bit further in. I like making sure that it gets nice and secure. I can simply move my bow over just a little bit because it's tied onto the ribbon. And then I'll go ahead, snip off whatever excess that I don't need, add some double-sided tape to the back, and I should be good to go. All right, let's have a look-see. I think that's absolutely beautiful. All that's left now is just to adhere it down onto my card base. I suggest using liquid glue because if you are going to do what I did, which is distress those edges, you're going to have some rolled edges, okay? And also you do have that metallic gold ribbon. Again, that does take quite a bit. You don't want your card lifting. So utilizing double-sided tape, well, I don't find that it will secure. So again, liquid glue. Once you have it nice and covered, you can just go ahead and line that up, and you will have some leeway again with liquid glue, and simply press down firmly. And we are now done with our card. Let's have a closer look at this. Just how visually stunning this is, a simple flat card, and yet it has so much dimension to it with all the little details in the stamps, the layering of colors, and the actual texturization of the paper. Have a very Merry Christmas. Thank you for watching Lavinia World. For more videos and tutorials like these, don't forget to subscribe. Also, don't forget to hit the little bell for notifications of new uploads.